Hello everybody, welcome back to Meet the Paralympian. Today we are joined live on YouTube and thanks everyone who's joined us on Zoom as well. Today we are joined with Baroness Grey-Thompson. Baroness Grey-Thompson started her athletic career with the 100-metre wheelchair racing back in 1984. Tanni's travelled to Seoul for her first international race in 1988, winning a bronze medal, and she went on to win 16 Paralympic medals. Tanni was one of the most gifted sportswomen of her generation, and after retiring from sport, she's worked in television and is currently a member of the House of Lords. She's a patron of a large number of charities and is a champion of disability rights. Tanni, welcome to the UBU. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So I know we've got a number of questions lined up for you today, but what we'll try and do, we want to kind of pick your brains and see what your life is all about. So we won't go too much into the Paralympic journey as such. However, our first question is what we always ask our panelists: is how did it feel like to represent Great Britain? But before I ask you that, I'd just like to introduce our panel. I'm here with Udi Archibong, who is the head of Equality and Diversity. Shirley Congdon, who's the Vice Chancellor of the University of Bradford, Menli Denyer, who's a student at the University of Bradford, Zain, who's our Sports Officer at the UBU, and myself will be presenting, who's a recent film and television production graduate. So thank you everybody for joining. You'll have your chance to ask your wonderful questions in a bit, but back to my question, Tanni, how did it feel like to represent Great Britain?
It's amazing, actually, in terms of kind of wearing the GB tracksuit is incredible, and it's very exciting, and it's a really cool thing to do. But the bits that everyone forgets is that, when you travel somewhere, you kind of travel with like 350 people together, and there is nothing worse than being at an airport and 350 identical team kit bags come off the carousel. So there's like some amazing bits, and then there's some bits which are kind of a bit dull and boring, to be honest. But and when you're doing it, you don't always think, you always think, yeah, okay, I'm representing, but it's a huge honor because so few people get to do it. And that is amazing. But also it's kind of, you have to get on with it and do it, because when you're at a games, it's amazing to do it, but you've got to get on and you've got to kind of deliver the medals or deliver the targets that you're meant to be. So you don't go out through the door every day, going training, going, oh, this is amazing, I'm representing GB. You kind of feel it's like a responsibility to compete well because so few people get to do it. So that's a really complicated question to ask for your first one.
It's a difficult question, but you answered it very well. Thank you for that. And obviously, with the pandemic and everything, everything's, our lives have changed completely. How have you kept yourself busy during this time?
Well, we're doing House of Lords online, which is, they're words that I never thought I'd say together. It's been kind of challenging in terms of, like legislation and things that we're working on. There's big bits of legislation we're working on, Internal Markets Bill, and Brexit, as well as coronavirus stuff, and trying to get our usual job. Being at home, I mean, there's bits, again, this is quite complicated. I've spent more time at home this year than I have in the last 6 years put together. So that's amazing. I'm not sure my family would agree that it's amazing. But I think work's taken over. It's difficult. I kind of think we're actually living at work and not working from home. And I'm lucky I've got space to work in at home. There's lots of people who don't have that privilege, but it's just been very different. And but it's also made me value things in a different way as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We've also been joined by Inshal Ahmed, who's our Community Activities Officer. Hi, Inshal. How are you doing?
Good, thanks, Connor. How are you doing? Sorry, there was some connectivity issues, so I was a couple of minutes late. But
that's
fine.
Hi,
Tanni, how are you doing?
What I'll do is I'll bring the attention over to the subs, and they'll ask yourself some questions, Tanni.
Hi, Tanni. So I've got a question for you. And it's from a student perspective, because obviously our student ambassadors, student leaders, we kind of do, we have a lot of students at University of Bradford who are disabled. So the question I want to ask is there anything that you feel that the student movement could do better to support people with disabilities?
Yes. So I think the world has changed slightly in terms of disabled people in education, but I still deal with loads and loads of cases of children who are excluded from education. And when you look at then how that filters into higher education, further education, there's lots of challenges around that. And we know that the disability employment gap is twice the national average. Most companies don't measure disability pay gap because the figures are huge. The disparity is huge. And we know as well things like, disabled people need a much higher level of qualification to get the same level of job as a non-disabled person. So there's all these challenges out there. What I'd really like to see, so I think the numbers through universities are getting better. I'd like to see more disabled people being able to stay on, do PhDs, do research. I'd love to see more disabled people work in sport. Actually, you don't have too many disabled people working in sport or Paralympic sport, which you kind of would probably expect. So I think, universities kind of need to be encouraging, open, and actually, I don't know any of them that are not. But if you have loads of discrimination to get to the point where at the university, it's going to be a really hard step to take. So, we just need to make sure that more disabled people have that opportunity to be at university and to study. But it's not necessarily, there's not necessarily one thing that can be done. There's just loads of things that need to be sorted before a young person gets to that point. I still, I don't see as many disabled people with PhDs and that as I'd like to. I'm not sure that's something one university can fix, but it's when you've got research into disability sport that's mostly being done by non-disabled people, because I read a lot of academic research around Paralympics, and you're thinking that's not, if that was, and a lot of the things that I talk about at the moment in terms of discrimination of disabled people and how they've been forgotten in the pandemic, or about media representation of them, if that was linked to any of the protected characteristic, there'd be uproar. But disabled people tend to be forgotten in the mix of things. So yeah, it's basically, it's just not forgetting. And it's more than having a ramp and a toilet. I think a lot of people think access is that, because there's also a lot of people with hidden impairments that aren't properly served or supported either. So, we've got to just be more creative about how we include everybody.
Thanks, Tanni.
And Tanni, you mentioned you're in the House of Lords, and we had a couple of people asking, how do you think Brexit will affect people with disabilities?
Wow. Well, about 3 minutes before I signed in today, it looked like there was a news announcement from the Prime Minister saying we might be leaving without a deal. So, well, that's how I read it. I'm not sure if that's exactly, but it was something along those lines. It affects disabled people in lots of ways. A lot of the cases I'm dealing with at the moment are around disabled people who need personal support. And in terms of visas and people from abroad working in that sector, there's lots of challenges. I think the reality is there's lots of don't knows with it. It's we could spend the next kind of 10 hours discussing how Brexit's going to affect people. I've been finding it kind of interesting in the last sort of month or so, people writing to me, British people who are living abroad, saying I voted to leave, but I didn't really understand the implications of what me living in another country meant. And I actually had one letter which said something along the lines of, I wanted lots of foreign people to leave the UK. I didn't realise it meant me leaving where I'm living now. Okay, so I mean, that's what I mean. I can always pick out, sort of the odd letters like that. The reality is, I think there's lots of unknowns with it, and it depends whether we leave with a deal or without a deal. I think the government have announced this week about reviewing Human Rights Act, and again, that's something that has a big impact on disabled people in terms of quality, inclusion, equity. So there's lots of really tough things at the moment in terms of again, sort of making sure that disabled people have the right to be included in society. personally, I voted to remain for loads of reasons, which I won't go into. Part of it was I thought negotiating out was going to be too difficult and would end up in a bit of a mess because it's a really, really complicated debate to have. It's not just, oh yeah, we leave. And one of the reasons I came to this conclusion, one of my colleagues was someone who'd negotiated us in and had worked around this the whole of his working life. And when he said to me, it's like untangling spaghetti, you go, okay, I'm going to listen to him. So for me, I probably would have preferred to work at some of the advantages and looked at how we can maximise our involvement rather than kind of excluding ourselves. But I do know a lot of people and a lot of disabled people are quite worried about what, coming out of COVID and Brexit are going to provide lots of challenges for us.
I bet. Thank you very much, Tanni.
Hi, Tanni. I've got a question for you. Hi. Apologies again for being late. It's just I'm in a different time zone. I'm sat in India.
Fair play.
And it's about 12. Anyways, so I was just wondering that lots of decisions that are made by the government, and obviously they affect the disabled people as well. So do you think, is there anything they can do to make the voice being heard at national and local government levels as well? So do you think that they can do anything differently, or is there anything that you'd like to tell us so that we can imply that in our university as well, just to make sure that everyone's heard, their voices are there at that level?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of seems to be a week of announcement or review. So Department of Work and Pensions have announced a review into disabled people and their experiences as well. So there's different ways that organisations and individuals can feed into that. That would be really important. I think one of the things that's been brought home to me through lockdown is that the voice of disabled people is just not heard, or they're not around the table. And, quite a lot of the things that I go to, I'm the only disabled person in the room talking about disability rights. And I have a view which could be different from somebody else with exactly the same level of impairment as I've got. So, I try to do an awful lot of work with younger disabled people, athletes, to help them find their voice and what their platform wants to be, and kind of, call it pay it forward. Because you can't just listen to kind of one person on some of these things. So what I would say is, it's, write to your MPs. If there's something that you feel strongly about, write to your MP and tell them about it. That works really well in the House of Lords when there's specific legislation going through. If there's a change in legislation that affects you, write to a peer who works in that area and, tell them about how that change is going to affect you. That's really important. But it's that voice. If I go to a sports event or it's like an admin event to do with sport, I probably know all the disabled people in the room, and okay, I've been in sport a long time, but I kind of shouldn't. And I should need more than my fingers and toes to count the number of disabled people that work in sport. And so that is a bit of a frustration of mine. So basically, a lot of the work I'm doing is to make sure that I'm not the only person who's doing that. And what's been interesting in, on the back of, Black Lives Matters, we're talking about listening to Black, Asian and minority ethnic people talk about their experiences is actually, a push to listen to disabled people talk about their experiences. And I was talking to someone who works in diversity and inclusion recently, and I was telling them about some of my experience of discrimination. And they basically said to me, well, we just didn't realise. And it's like, if somebody who works in D&I doesn't realise, and I don't experience that much discrimination compared to most disabled people, I'm treated three ways. One way as an ex-athlete, which is generally quite nice. Once as a parliamentarian, which people either like me or hate me. And the third way is a disabled person. So, when someone who works in D&I doesn't get it, then, it just shows how much more we have to do to help other people, understand it. And today's Human Rights Day, and I just come off a conference talking about that. And, at the beginning of the pandemic, thousands of disabled people were issued with compulsory do not resuscitate orders, which basically said, without consultation, without them knowing, they just landed on their doorstep, which basically said, if you get COVID, you're not going to be allowed into hospital. You're going to be at home. So it didn't even give us the chance. And I didn't get one, but when I say I mean disabled people, it didn't even give disabled people a chance to be in hospital to fight for a ventilator. The decision was already made. They had no value. they might as well just be got rid of. So it's stuff like that, and that's why I talk about this stuff a lot. It's just that is to get people to think about how we value disabled people and what we think about them and how we include them. Because we're just not even close to being included in the way that disabled people should be.
That's quite interesting, Tanni. And obviously, you made the move from sports into politics. So how did that transition happen? Because obviously, there must have been something that you thought, I can change this, but I need to be in politics to make that change happen. So was there something that kind of led to that transition?
Yeah, some of it was really personal. So I was born with spina bifida, and because I could walk a little bit when I started school, I started off in mainstream school, and then my spine collapsed when I was young, and my vertebra severed my spinal cord, and it paralysed me. And because of that, my head teacher was basically too busy to ever write to the local education authority to tell them I was a wheelchair user. And my parents fought really hard for me to get a chair. And there were loads of people around my parents who said, oh, if you have a chair, it's giving up and you'll never do anything. But my dad was like, you need to be independent. You need to be able to move around, and you need to be able to carry a drink. You need to kind of just not live at home forever, basically. And if you're trying to walk with calipers and crutches when you can't do that, what's the point? So yeah, they fought to get me a chair. And then a really big turning point in my life was I thought I was going to go to the same school my sister was at. And then we had a letter from the head teacher which said, we don't take people like Tanni at our school. So my parents used legislation. They threatened to sue the Secretary of State for Wales over my right to go to a mainstream school. And at the age of 10, I'm reading white and green papers. And my dad's saying to me, these are really important. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then, so we never talked party politics in our house. To be honest, I have no idea how my parents ever voted. We never talked about party politics, but we talked about political issues and change and things. And then I did politics at university slightly by chance, I have to say. I was going to Loughborough. I was going to do a history degree. And then just before I was due to go, they shut the course down. And I got a letter saying, you can do another degree in a similar sort of area. And I was like, I'll do politics. It's all fairly similar. Actually, virtually the same courses. Very grandly said to my head of department, just before I graduated, I am never going into politics because that's for losers. That came, and it was, but yeah, always be careful what you say. So yeah, it was always, and then competing. I traveled the world. I got to go to places, like the United States, places where you saw disabled people living very different lives and, different levels of exclusion and discrimination. And, in the USA, amazing, they have the American with Disabilities Act, which is way stronger than our legislation, and a different attitude and, full scholarships for university students from like the 60s. But then the Paralympics wasn't covered on TV when we had that in the UK. So I think it's seeing all that. And then athlete welfare became part of that. I kind of saw a lot of my friends over the years picked up and dropped and not always treated terribly well. And I saw coaches treated the same. So it all kind of came together. And sorry, it's quite a long answer, but it's all this like jigsaw that all just suddenly began to fit. And then in my 20s, I had the opportunity to sit on the National Disability Council, which oversaw the implementation of the Disability Discrimination Act. And that was this moment for me where it's like, okay, social model of impairment, and it's not me, it's them. And there was this sort of light bulb moment for me when I was about 21. So that all came together. And then retirement, very interested in political change. And my dad always used to say to me, you're very privileged. And I was, because of my education, because I had them instilling like a work ethic and telling me how to fight. Or actually my dad saying to me, okay, shut up now, my dad was kind of a really important critical friend in terms of challenging me what I was doing. And so a lot of it came down to him saying to me, you're really privileged. You need to kind of, you're quite bullshit and you've got an opinion and you need to kind of tell people what it's like. So it's not absolutely not me speaking on behalf of other disabled people, because I think that's appalling, but it's me just gathering different people's experiences and using a platform to tell other people those things. So I had the chance to become a crossbench peer. So one of the I got recommended to go into the process, and it's quite a strange process. As a crossbencher, there's an interview, and I mean, the longest 2 hours of my entire life. And, you know, one of the questions I was asked was, what's the most interesting debate you've listened to in the House of Lords? And you go, oh, interesting. I mean, we do stuff that's very technical, really technical. And if it's your area of interest, if it's debate on sport, physical activity or welfare, it's really interesting. But if it's a subject you don't know about, it's like, I have no idea. So anyway, yeah, I got through the interview process, and in 2010 I got put in. So and it's a place where I have rarely experienced any discrimination. It's a place where once you're there, you're a peer with a big P and a peer with a little p. And for me, that's amazing. So actually transferring from sport to politics was not that difficult, because in sport you spend a lot of time training and preparing, and you have this tiny moment where you get to race at the highest level. You know, my career on the track at Paralympics is 19 and a half minutes of my life, and politics is quite similar. You spend a lot of time reading briefing sheets and researching and, you know, just talking to people about their experience and writing speeches. And then you have 2 minutes in the chamber to give a speech that will get people to think differently about how they vote. You know, so it's quite similar in a lot of ways. What I would say about politics, well, in sport, you know, I used to get very red and sweaty and covered in snot when I was competing. There's less sweat and snot involved in politics, generally.
Excellent. I think there's a lot, you know, we can all learn, you know, even us here, you know, listen to your story. I think there's so much we can learn from. Tanni, you have led quite an amazing life. You have an MBE, an OBE, and a DBE. When you found out you'd be given these awards, how did you feel? What was it like picking them up?
Oh, so I got my MBE after my second Paralympics, which was Barcelona, and I got to take my mum and my dad, so that was really cool.
That's nice.
And you know, at that point, not many Paralympians had received honours, and a few years after that, I got to sit on the Sports Honours Committee, so I kind of hopefully influenced some of that change in terms of actually recognising Paralympians. The OBE was, oh gosh, after Sydney, yeah, and that was quite exciting. And then the DBE, which was when I was Major Dame, was after Athens. Now, really sadly, my mum passed away just before that, so she never got to see it. My dad got to see that. And I kind of hope she would have been proud of the hat I wore. I got a really big hat. I don't wear hats. I wear bobble hats. But it was like, I'm going to Buckingham Palace. I'm going to be Major Dame. I am getting a hat. So I had a really big hat. And yeah, it definitely is lovely. I mean, the thing is, it's like, they're really lovely things to have. You don't kind of start your sports career because you think, I'd like to be an MBE. But it's really lovely icing on the cake to be recognised by an independent group that thinks you've done something that deserves it. So, and it's just, I haven't got it here. It's a real shame. It's in my office in London. You get these two amazing, I don't know how you describe them. One is a silver star, and then the other is quite a big blue enamel cross, which you can only wear in you can only wear them if you go to a white tie dinner. And I don't go to many of those. But they're pretty impressive when you stick them on a dress. They're pretty cool to have.
I want to see the hats, Tanni.
I'm going to see if I can Google a picture of my hat. It was an impressive hat.
So
a lot of our sorry, Conor, I will just have to ask that question about Ritz. So did you go to Ritz to celebrate after that? Because a lot of our Paralympians we've been chatting to, they've told us that some of the people have got that MBE, OB, and they've gone to Ritz to celebrate. So was that your place to celebrate, or did you go to somewhere else?
No, so my MBA and my OBE went to Ritz for afternoon tea, and I can eat a lot of cake. I made sure I went hungry, so I ate a lot. And then for my DBE, I organised lunch for about 12 people that who'd really helped me in my career, that I just wanted to say thank you to. So it was a hotel in Marylebone. I can't remember. Right, I'm gonna have to Google that one. And that is really bad. I can't remember, but it was basically I just wanted to say thank you. So yeah, that was nice. I took some friends and family out for lunch.
That was an excellent question, inshallah. love it. Along with myself and the Salves, we've got Shirley Congdon, the Vice Chancellor, Udi Archibald, Head of Faculty of Diversity, and Melanie Denyer, a student at the University of Bradford. Would any of you like to put your microphones on and ask Tanni some questions? Shirley, after you. You nodded your head, I see.
Yeah, okay. So, well, I was really reflecting, Tanni, on what you said about the sort of disabled people not being heard, and what you also said about your father and parents saying that you were privileged. And so obviously in Bradford, we're living in a city of relative disadvantage. And as you'll be well aware, COVID's heightened all of that. And we've got a big programme of work that's been going on for a lot of years around a big cohort study born in Bradford. And basically that's been going on for, I don't know, 10, 11 years now. And all of the data is what you'd expect, I suppose, that the early years are really, really important. And when it's an issue of the early years being the most important years for the foundation of a successful, more successful start at education and getting to university where people are living in poverty, I'm just sort of wondering how you feel we could get to a position where evidence like this can get into policy making more quickly, because all of, the Marmot review 10 years on, it's so disappointing that we're not being able to get good social policy out. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
It's really interesting. A lot of businesses are now looking at socio-economic background as part of some of the barriers for people to get into work and to get promotion. And I think that's been quite helpful. I think, in more recent years, we're talking about intersectionality, which is also, really important because, I always used to say I'm a Venn diagram. I'm Welsh and I'm a mum and I'm a wife and I'm a parliamentarian, but I don't want to call myself a politician, which probably makes me one. So we're all these sort of different things. And so, it's stuff we've probably known for, if you've been really honest, of course, we kind of know that this affects people's ability to do things. I was talking to a friend recently who had a really challenging childhood, and she's now incredibly successful businesswoman, and she's in her mid to late 50s. And she said to me, she still panics when she goes to events. And it's like, why? And she goes, because I panic about what to wear. And it's just really interesting that it goes back to her childhood when she didn't really have any choice of clothes to wear. And you go, oh my God, and you just sort of make these assumptions that some of these things get knocked out, but they don't. So actually partly having people talking about these things, I think is really important. In terms of social policy, I think, it's actually either when there's legislation going on, then that's, that's always an easy one to say, is about feeding that into the people who work on it. We've got an all parliamentary party group system, which there's ways to feed that in. But I think it's also useful if trying to talk to, local businesses that either are based in around Bradford or, companies, big companies that have, satellite businesses, in and around the area, in terms of talking to them, because a lot of businesses want the data, they just don't necessarily know where to go and find it, or don't necessarily they might think of commissioning the university to do it, but they might not know that work that's been ongoing. And that longevity of data is really important in terms of looking at those things. So one company that I was talking to, they're able to track entries, graduate entries, and they're able to kind of make predictions about where people will go if in the next 10 years in terms of opportunities and things, to make sure that people have, because it's not necessarily about giving somebody exactly the same opportunity, because that will affect people differently. It's about the difference between equality and equity. It's about giving people the opportunities or filling the gaps in the things they need to know and what they need to do. And a lot of business, businesses are being really, they know that they have to have diverse people because they're going to have diverse clients, and they just sometimes don't always know how to make it happen. So the longevity of data is massively important in terms of that, because it's that there are, and very sadly there are young people who are almost written off before they're born. And that's just the, so, I mean, this is maybe not a great example, but if you look at the Olympic medalists from the Beijing Games, about 38% of those medalists went to independent schools. And it's a whole combination of things. It is because the parents may have more money for the child to do sport, but not every child in an independent school has rich parents. It's partly, it might be facilities. It's partly because they have fully trained PE teachers in the prep school. There's loads of different reasons. But, and actually that's changed in the last couple of cycles. But you can't tell me that we've only got kids who are good at sport in independent schools. We've got loads and loads of really talented children. They're just not given the opportunity to do it and try it, and given the right resources. So I think there's a lot that can be done on this, because again, coming out of COVID and where we are economically, we're in a really difficult place. This is the biggest amount of money we've borrowed since the Second World War. It's twice as bad as the 2008 crisis. We need to find ways, and Brexit, we need to find ways to be creative in a rapidly changing world economy. And if we don't give everyone a chance, then we're not going to be fit for purpose. So there's loads of reasons why this is, needs to be looked at.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I've noticed that is happening, definitely in West Yorkshire, is that the system leaders do seem to be working better together, and they're trying to work and make the right decisions. I think for the first time ever, I do feel that there's a bit of sort of value-led leadership going on in certain parts that perhaps there wasn't before, which is starting to feel a bit more encouraging, but there's just so far to go.
No, it's never, sometimes it feels like I kind of hit my head into a brick wall and then rebuild the wall and take my head back into it again. But it's like you've got to keep going with some of the stuff, because I lockdown, I traveled by train a lot, just because I do a lot of traveling, and trying to drive up and down to London from where I live is just really hard work, and then do a really full week of work. And I used to tweet a lot about trains and lack of access and things like that, and somebody said to me, oh yeah, you're the one who tweets. And it's like, yeah, I'll stop tweeting. Just stop putting barriers in my place. Stop talking about me needing help to get on a train and all this. Like, just make it accessible. And all I want is the same miserable experience of commuting as everyone else. I aspire to having this. I don't even get the same miserable experience. So it's you've got to keep going with these things and find. There's always loads of levers to affect change, and it might not be the first 10 different things you try, but I just think you've got to keep going with these things.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Moody, if you've got a question,
yeah,
go ahead.
So that's my, thank you so much, Tammy. That has been, I'm sitting here just thinking, I like the comment you made about diversity and inclusion professionals, and sometimes people just thinking they know it all, but I can tell you that there are some help that we need to give to some of them. Now, you did make a mention of intersectionality. So as Pro Vice Chancellor, Equality and Diversity and Inclusion for the university, I'm looking at different approaches to making this EDI movement and journey easier for everybody. You talked about Black Lives Matter, for example, and there are other activities that we've seen. How can we encourage that intersectional work in these groups? So why would we have BLM without looking at the voices of disabled Black people, for example? How can we come together? So yes, there is something about if there are things to be shouted about disability and so on, I'm going to be there. But how do we join up in such a way that we're doing it crisscrossing, looking at different opportunities, so that we actually put the real pressure on? So please help practically. How do we ensure that the intersectionality is real?
I mean, if it was easier, we would have fixed it. So, I mean, it's hard stuff to do. I mean, there's definitely people who are really happy to talk about things like that. So, I am, but I've only got one experience. Not everybody wants to talk about their lived experience of discrimination and difficulty. I think there's a lot around other people's perception of discrimination, which is really interesting. So I think there's an element of, the people who are happy to talk about it. It's, and I think some of this has got to come from leaders talking about, their different experiences and the challenges they had. I think one thing when you're a leader, you're meant to have found everything easy, and you're not meant to admit to any weakness, or or what's perceived as a weakness. So I think that's important. I think also asking people to think about their own intersectionality. So for me, and I had this from being really young, was that from being quite a young athlete, people just defined me as an athlete, and it'd be like, oh, you're the athlete. And I've been retired 13 and a half years, and people still stop me and go, oh, you're the athlete, aren't you? You go, yeah. And so, because it's easier to say yes, you know. So, but from being really young, my dad was, and mum and dad were, you know, don't just think of yourself as an athlete. Think about all the other things you have, because, you know, and so without even thinking about, and intersectionality didn't exist as a word back then, but, you know, I was already thinking about myself as being Welsh and a book lover and somebody who hated math, or, you know, all those different things and the different skills and the different gaps that I felt I had in my life. So I think it's also important for people to challenge themselves about it. And, you know, I said about other people's perception, you know, so some of the discrimination I faced has been really horrible, but then some of it's made me the person I am. So it's really hard to sort of disassociate those things. So yeah, there's definitely some things I'd like to have not experienced, but again, but I think as well, because I had a lot of resilience built into me as a young athlete, that's given me the skills to deal with some of those things. And I think how we talk about resilience in young people, you know, in sport, you're expected just to have it, but there's loads of things that you can do to build it. And so I think, again, when we look at young people, we have to think about how we instill resilience in them to have this. The reason I'm quite, most of the time, you know, okay at dealing with people who say people like you can't, because it always comes, it's really weird, when it's people like you, it all comes with a pointy finger, and they'll go, people like you. And, you know, so my response to that, which I've rehearsed over many years, is, what do you mean, Welsh people? What? So when it's like, people like you can't get on the train on your own, or people like you shouldn't have children, go, well, what Welsh people? And they stop. And actually, the reason I do that, I mean, I don't mean to be flippant by it, but I've got a really fiery temper, and I only think of the witty, amusing, really clever thing to say 3 hours later. So it stops me swearing at somebody, to be honest. Yeah, I think it's how we talk about those things. And certainly what I see with some younger disabled people, when the norm is that you experience daily discrimination, I don't want to go up to people and go, do you realise that's discrimination? But sometimes some people just accept it as the norm, because that's what they experience every single day of their lives, and they need support to be able to deal with it and fight back and you know, to be able to step away from it. So I'm not sure, but I think people thinking about their own intersectionality is really important in terms of understanding that, you know, how we balance everyone's rights and how we help everybody just to be a bit nicer to each other. And that sounds really twee when I say it, but we probably could all just do being a bit nicer to each other and just listening to other people's views and opinions.
Thank you very much for that. Can I just ask one more question? You talked about data longevity, and it made me just think about the fundamentals of intelligence-led or evidence-led approach to diversity and inclusion, and just looking at how might you improve the people's confidence in telling, as in filling out that form or whatever form, and I get into the debate about the declaration and disclosure, and giving that data about your whatever identity. So what's the best way that you've used in the past to give people confidence to declare, disclose, explain who they are, tick that little box?
It's a bit like a chicken and egg. Until you've got good data and people feel comfortable disclosing, it's hard to bring about policy changes. But not everyone might want to disclose or talk about it. And this was quite a few years ago, I had quite a robust discussion with someone because they wanted me to disclose I was disabled on something. I was like, well, okay, well, you can see I'm a wheelchair user. But actually, how I'm impacted with my impairment depends on the environment I'm in. If there's no steps and there's a lift to every floor I want to go to, and there's an accessible toilet I can use, the impact on me is relatively little. But if there's steps and there's no lift and there's no bathroom I can use, then actually the impact on me is huge. So people have to feel that something will come out of disclosure as well, that they'll be listened to, and there'll be action taken from doing it. And I think especially around, this year, International Day of Disabled People, and, looking at invisible impairments, that's been really interesting, because I think, there are some people who maybe don't realise they have something that you could count as an impairment. Or, I could talk about this for hours, but it's actually recognising that we all need things that are done in a slightly different way to help us feel included and help us feel that we can contribute. And one of the challenges we've got around disabled people, a lot of businesses in the last couple of years have redefined disability and impairment and made it a much wider definition. So a lot of businesses, figures have gone up, but without employing anyone different. And then some of that is about people with invisible impairments feeling happy to disclose. Some people maybe with a visible impairment feeling happy to disclose. But that doesn't mean to say we should stop pushing the barriers in terms of making sure that, the targets and what we're aiming for is still really high. So I think it's people understanding and having an understanding of why people don't feel it's okay to disclose, and you can't make people, so sorry, I'm not sure that's even a full answer for you, but I think as people feel, the more that it won't be used against them, they'll feel happier to just go, and they feel they're being listened to. Being listened to, I think, is really important in any environment, because there's no point filling in yet another form if every time you filled in the form, nothing's happened with what, the thing that you're trying to raise, or the issue you're trying to raise.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Melanie, do you have a question yourself? And everybody who's in the chat, feel free to message your any questions in the chat feature on Zoom as well.
I definitely have questions. I would have lots of questions, but I'm a disabled mature student at the university. So I'm approaching 50. I wasn't always disabled. I'm now a power chair user. I'm hypermobile. And so I've come to disability late in life, and been pretty horrified at what I've seen in terms of how we get treated and how poorly the world is set up. And it's been hugely educational, frankly. And a large part of what I'm going to do with my master's is going to be trying to make technology work better for disabled people. That's my end goal by doing the Applied AI course. And that's really vastly important to me. But one of the things I find hugely problematic a lot of the time is, right now, as a disabled person, you look for role models. And I think about the youngsters. The role models they've got, well, we once upon a time had Stephen Hawking. He's still in the public memory. And we have Paralympians, and that's great. But ultimately what we see is Stephen Hawking or sports people, and occasionally Adam Hills. And right now, what we're not seeing is a greater diversity of roles and role models for disabled people elsewhere. If you can't see it, and if other people aren't seeing it, then you still get somebody who will pat you on the head, talk to your husband as if he's your carer, try and patronize you and ask you where your carer is at an airport when they've just heard you speak 3 separate languages to 3 separate people as you're organizing your check-in and all the rest of it. And there's some quite horrific stuff that goes on in terms of the discrimination. Hell, trying to explain to the policeman who took my complaint when I got assaulted for just being a woman in a wheelchair in York that this was a hate crime, because the only thing I was doing differently to anyone else in the street was existing in a wheelchair. How do we improve this representation? How do we get people to see more than our wonderful superhuman Paralympians, who are always advertised as superhumans, or Stephen Hawking, and actually normalize this, that disabled people have so much to offer beyond their sporting ability? How do we do this? And what can we do? And what can I do as well, frankly, to help raise this profile?
Yeah, you're totally right. Sorry, I just switched my camera off because I had to move because my husband needs my laptop. So sorry, I've just moved somewhere else. You're absolutely right in everything you say in terms of, 2012 was the most amazing games ever, but it didn't change the world for disabled people. No. It changed the world for some Paralympians. And yes, there are inspirational moments in that, but what I worry about is lots of young disabled people are now being told, oh, you're going to be a Paralympian. You're going to, if you play sport at recreational level, it's like, oh, you're going to the Paralympics. It's like, no, I'm just not very good. But there's an assumption that every disabled person is going to go to the Paralympics. And, you know, as an ex-athlete, I'm really frustrated by that, because what about being a lawyer or an academic or a banker or, you know, whatever, or a teacher? So I think there's a lot around representation of disabled people. So we don't see a lot of disabled people in the media, and I'm doing quite a lot of work on that at the moment. You know, a Paralympian is somebody, you know, to get to the Paralympics, it's quite a small number of categories of disabled people who are even able to compete at the Paralympics. So, you know, it's and then you have to be pretty good, and you have to train incredibly hard. So it's a tiny percentage of the population that get to do that. So I think there's something in terms of how we see disabled people on TV, just in the background, with a story that's not about them. But, you know, they're just, and we've had it on EastEnders and Coronation Street and other things, but just see, American TV is much better at doing this, where you just see, you know, a random disabled person in the background. And that's really cool. You know, that's because then that's part of the normalization. And some work I've been looking at in terms of like Oscars. So there's a bit of a joke that if you play a disabled character, then you're more likely to be nominated and win an Oscar. So 16% of Oscars have gone to people, non-disabled actors, who've played disabled characters. Only, and depending what data you look at, between 1 and 3 Oscars have actually gone to a disabled actor. And so if I'm being really harsh, I'd say it's 1. And then the stories that win they're always heartwarming and lovely. And you've got Me Before You, which is the story of a multimillionaire, you know, young man who's become paralyzed, and it's all, you know, he finds a carer and they fall in love, and he goes to Dignitas to save her from being trapped in this horror, you know, relationship with this poor man, and then, you know, he leaves her all the millions. And, you know, I kind of look at that and go, what does that say about disabled people? About, look, if you're a multimillionaire disabled person, what about someone who can't get into work or is living on universal credit? What does that make you feel? And, you know, cripping up, which is the term that's used to cover this, for very, very good reasons. Blacking up is completely and utterly unacceptable. But cripping up is fine. It's totally accepted as a thing. And they'll say, oh, we haven't got any disabled actors. Well, just employ some. And, you know, I get quite annoyed about this, because it's... yeah,
well, that was Come As You Are recently, where every single disabled character played by an able-bodied actor, and a whole load of ridiculous excuses as to why this should be the case. There were so many disabled actors who were really hacked off with this, and some great films in response to show exactly what breadth of talent we've got in the industry.
And it also, you know, from that, so I was going to mention that one, that then it's, the story is, you know, they're taken off to, you know, a brothel because you wouldn't be in a relationship. So that's, you know, then people watch that and then go, so, I mean, I've just been asked so many times, you're married? You've got a child? Oh, it's almost like, what, someone will marry you? Oh, gosh, is he normal? You know, or exactly what you're saying about carer. I mean, we've had quite a robust discussion somewhere where they were saying, is he a carer? No, he's not. He's my husband. Oh, no, he's not my carer. And they tried to not charge him to go into this venue. And it's like, no, we're paying for him because he's not my carer. But it's that very low level discrimination that then feeds all the other issues. And I had a discussion with whoever runs Dwayne Johnson's Twitter feed about his film Skyscraper. And I love his films. I mean, they're not believable in any way, shape or form. And that's why I watch them, you know. And the one with the tsunami where he drives his motorboat through a building and finds his dog. I mean, and you know it's going to be a happy ending. And that's, but in Skyscraper, he played a leg amputee, and he's dangling 200 foot in the air with the rope caught around his prosthetic leg. And all my friends with leg amputees were saying, whatever he's got sticking his leg on, can I have it? So that's not, something was printed where it said he did it, and that it was kind of to show that disabled people have abilities. And it was like, no, just it's, and this is quite controversial. Something I hate it when, sorry, I'm on my soapbox now, is when disability is written with DIS small and then ability in capitals. And somebody said to me recently, it was to show that disabled people have ability. Right. Well, do you want to write woman with the man in capitals to show that women have abilities, or, you know, and yeah, that's what you're saying about disabled people. Yeah. So it's the underlying stuff that they don't even think about. They just go, yeah. And I had to listen to someone recently who works in D&I say, and you know what, not all disabled people are stupid.
I can believe it, sadly.
And it's like,
I've actually been told I'm not allowed to call myself disabled, that I'm supposed to call myself a person with a disability. It's like, well, excuse me, but...
And there's
I'm a disabled person.
We got a message in the chat from Carol who says, absolutely agree, Tanni. I'm rubbish at mental arithmetic and walking. Society ensures I have access to calculators on my phone, my laptop, my office. If society ensured I had access to drop curbs and accessible transport and lifts, I wouldn't be disabled. And a question from Dawn says, I work at Bradford Disability Sports and Leisure and encourage physical activity at grassroots to elite level. And Dawn asks what advice you'd give to somebody wanting to get involved in sport.
So I said this to a select committee a few years ago. We need more disabled people who are just not very good at sport. So some of our talent ID systems, they decide in a very short amount of time whether you're talented or not, and if you're not, there's not always places to go. So there is still discrimination in some clubs, and you know, some places. You know, I did have an athletics club say to me, again, we don't really take people like you, and I sort of made them let me join. And then there was one night where one of the coaches came up to me and said, right, the rules of the track are whoever's got the fastest PB gets to stay on the track. And we're doing time trials, so you need to leave while we do time trials. And actually, that's really because athletics club is really quite inclusive, and you all get on with each other, and you all sort of learn to stay out each other's way. And I was like, oh, okay. So I said to him, what are the lads' PBs? And he's like, 151. Like, right, mine's 149, so I'm staying then. So I only did one lap, and then I left to make a bit of I pushed it quite slowly. But it was like, oh, do you know what? If you come over and said, the lads want to run some time trials, is it all right if we have 4 lanes? Yeah, of course it is. It doesn't matter if I do my stuff in there. Or, you know what, it doesn't, I don't need to do it within the next 10 minutes. You know, there's just different ways to say things. But yeah, we need to make joining the club, joining the gym, being in the sport, being just pretty rubbish at sport, we need to make that the norm. And we need to rethink it as physical activity.
Sorry, Tanni, I think you're covering your microphone slightly.
Sorry.
You sound perfect now, no worries. Sorry,
because I had to move. I've got to now hold my phone. So yeah, we need to make physical activity like the norm. And, you know, a lot of disabled people have said that, and this is research from the Activity Alliance, that they feel uncomfortable being physically active, or, you know, it's hard for them to do so, or they don't feel included. So we need to kind of open up club. We need to help, you know, sport at club level is run by volunteers. We need to help the volunteers be inclusive, because you wouldn't, well, you hope you wouldn't say, you know, if a young woman turned up at a sports club, we don't say, oh, we don't take women. But there are some clubs that feel completely okay to say, well, we don't take disabled people. And through coach education, through understanding, through imagery, we need to change that. And we need to think about, we need a broader base of pyramid of disabled people being active. And like for me, you know, now I'm at the age now where I'm just not very good at anything I do. I'm a bit slow and a bit old, and I don't lift many weights. And, you know, we need a lot more people like me, you know, being somewhere in the system.
Excellent. Thank you, Tanni. And thank you, Melanie, for your questions as well.
Thank you.
We've got some comments in the chat. One from Carol, who says, I got refused membership of a gym because they felt a disabled person would be an insurance risk. And another asked me to leave my assistant's dog at reception. So it's hard to even be rubbish at sports as a disabled person. And then Sierra Humphreys, I have autism, and when I was taking part in trials for the school athletic ones, a bully said to me, what are you doing here? This isn't Special Olympics. So it kind of shows that society, even though we've come so far in terms of disabled access in disability sports, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done as a society. So what would you recommend, like someone like myself, who's a sports and wellbeing officer, does in terms of working with the sports teams and the gyms to make sure that everything is accessible to disabled students?
So one thing is, you can find me on the House of Lords email system, but my email is Grey-Thompson@parliament.uk. send me an email. So I chair an organisation called UK Active, which is the membership body for gyms and leisure sector. So, you know, if I know that that's happening, then, you know, I kind of want to change that, because actually the whole sector wants to be welcoming to everybody. It just sometimes, you know, mistakes are made. And so, yeah, if you put anyone in touch with me, I'd love to help out with that. I think health and safety. Oh, now this is where I get quite conflicted, because there's a lot of really good reasons we have health and safety, you know, but then health and safety is usually the reason given to stop disabled people doing that. And it's usually non-disabled people deciding what a disabled person can do and what is my health and safety. Disabled people should be able to make stupid decisions the same as anyone else, but quite often we're not allowed to, because we're like, oh, you can't do that. Yeah, it's hard to pick out whether people are well-meaning, trying to be protective, trying to be helpful, or just trying to be exclusionary. And sometimes it's all those things. And then some of the research from Scope that showed that, you know, a lot of non-disabled people have not met a disabled, or not knowingly met a disabled person, or not spoken to a disabled person. They then become scared of doing it, and they kind of panic and, you know, say things that are either stupid, like, what's wrong with you then? Well, nothing. Or, you know, do the health and safety thing. So I think there's something really big coming back to the disabled person's voice about having enough of us to, because it's really hard sometimes to fight the system on your own. So I think it is finding other people, not to fight for you, but to help you and to talk through those things and to find solutions to deal with it and to find the right answers and to know how to challenge. Because when you experience that discrimination daily, it's just sometimes easier to walk away, you know, and sometimes easier just go, oh, do you know what, this is too much. I'm not going to do it. And one thing that lockdowns made me realise is that the amount of resilience I've built up just to live day to day. And so with lockdown, not being in contact with anybody in the real world, it was sometime in the summer, I went out and somebody was really patronising to me and asked me, did I need help? I said, no, I'm fine, thank you. They asked me second time, did I need help? I said, no, I'm fine, thank you. And then the third time, the barrier that had been put in my way, they took out of my hand to help me. And I just said, I don't need help, I need access. And then they turned around and went, well, I was just trying to help you. Well, what, so I'm meant to feel guilty now because you didn't listen to my answer twice and you then helped me when I told you I didn't. So, you know, there's some really complex things in that about the I was just trying to help you, because I'm immediately meant to say sorry. Oh, no, it's okay. Carry on patting me on the head. That's no. And actually, even the fact I'm talking about this is stuff that I probably wouldn't have done quite in this way before. But it was that moment in time that was like, wow, I'm normally just much calmer, and you just wipe, you know, flick it off and just go, oh, well, you know, it's okay. Well, you know, I'll just get on and I'll get on with my day. So I think that's made me become feistier. Now, publicly feistier. I think I'm always feisty in terms of having the discussion and you know, looking at legislation and ways of change. But I think I've become a bit more feisty talking about it, because you can't just knock away these things all the time when it's just happening to you every time. Yeah, we're meant to be compliant. So I just saw on the bottom of my phone flash up like the good crip. Yeah, totally right. Was that Melanie? Yeah, totally. We're meant to be grateful and thank you and smile and let people patronize us and let people help us. And, you know, and if you say anything, then you're the bad crip and you've got a chip on your shoulder and you're ungrateful. And, you know, it's really hard work, actually, you know, having to be compliant all the time. And there's definitely ways to kind of challenge, you know, swearing at someone doesn't often affect change, but you know, that's why I think it's just more important that we kind of talk about it and do it, because it's Carol said, it's exhausting. It absolutely is totally exhausting. Having to go, no, it's all right. I don't mind not getting on that train. I'll just get on the one that's an hour later. Yeah, because nobody's turned up. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I don't mind that there's not a toilet on the train. It's okay. And just, yeah, I'm kind of, I think some of it's turning 50 as well, to be honest. I think, you know, it's like, do you know what? I'm done with being patient. Really am. And so, yeah, anyway.
That's excellent. Thank you, Tanni. I'm just cautious of the time, but just from what you said there about, you know, almost people who think they're being helpful, but actually they're being quite patronising. What would you tell people who are almost in who do that? They think they're being helpful when they're actually almost being quite insulting. What would you say? How can they change their actions? In a quick couple of sentences.
Absolutely listen to disabled people. So it is not your judgment or an individual's judgment to make whether a disabled person is struggling or not. And even if they look like they're struggling, if they say they don't want any help, you walk away, because that is up to them to decide whether they need help or not. And, just before lockdown, I was on the tube and someone said to me, it's rush hour, You go, yeah, it's rush hour. Yeah, 7:30. And I didn't say this, but it was like 7:30 in the morning. Yeah, because rush hour. You should travel when it's quieter because people have important jobs to go to. She was like, yeah, I work in Westminster. I'm off there. I sit in the Lords. I'm off there for my day. And he's like, yeah, but people have important jobs? Yeah. Okay. So I said, oh, I'm off to, actually, I'm going to vote against the government and I'm going to move into number 10 and I'm going to become Britain's next dictator. Then I'm going to take over the world. And I sort of smiled. I said it really jokingly. And I was like, oh, yeah, thinking he's going to laugh. And he went, yeah, but do it when it's quieter because people have important jobs. Like, you didn't listen to me. And so for me, I use that as an example. Listen to the answer and walk away. Do you know what? It's up to disabled people to decide whether they need help or not. And it's so, I wouldn't go up to another woman and ask, does she need help? Her say no twice and let me help her anyway. So, don't do that to anyone who's disabled.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much. Melanie, Udi, Shirley, if you've got anything else to ask Baroness Tanni, this is your opportunity.
Well, I'm just wondering, Tanni, like the exhausted thing, and I'm imagining you just going, those moments, and how do you maintain the stamina? You said earlier, well, like you said, you hit your head against the brick, and then you get up again, and you just continue to go on. But do you take any? Are you able to take any downtime from the constancy of it?
I'm very lucky. My family are incredible in terms of helping me, support me. I'm also, I'm also quite stubborn and willful, if you haven't already spotted. And, I just think, well, you've got to keep going. And some of that's coming back to my parents, you've got to speak out. If you feel you can do it, you need to do it, because there's lots of other people who can't, or need a bit of encouragement or help and support, or need to see that's happening. So for me, lockdown has helped me rethink about a lot of stuff, but it's made me, I think, more determined as well to not put up with excuses. So January the 1st this year, trains were meant to be wheelchair accessible under the Disability Discrimination Act. In January this year, I was told I just needed to wait another 30 years. I was like, nah, not doing that. So I think, what keeps me going is that I think there's a chance of change. Actually, I'm inspired by the thing that things are moving, not anywhere as near as quick as I want. I think if I didn't think things would change, I'd probably pack up and go home. And to be honest, if the House laws can go online in an institution that hasn't really changed in 400 and something years, there's hope for us all. So, and I think by doing this, I'm really lucky. The more people I talk to, the more help and support I get, the more disabled people I meet who tell me their experiences and support me and nag me and help me. That kind of keeps me going. So I think I'm really, again, lucky that there's lots of disabled people that have very similar experiences that help me keep the fight going.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tanni, and thanks for asking that, Shirley. Udi and Melanie, if you've got any final questions, here's your chance.
I think mine is similar. You've talked about resilience, and yes, you are somebody who's just going to keep at it. But how would you advise other disabled people to manage that challenge? So it's a bridge between the frustration of things not changing and their contribution to making things change. And how do you advise somebody else? Because I think you've got your own style, but what's your advice for others?
Yeah, and I think sport gives you that resilience and helps you build it. So, it's hard. So for me, social media has been really helpful in terms of connecting with other disabled people. And you know, sharing experiences, stories, learning from other people, laughing about some things. You know, I think it for me, talking about things with other disabled people really matters. And actually, it's about finding the different levers, finding different people who'll support you to help you deal with those things in a really sort of collaborative way, not like a patronizing way. So for me, it's finding other people, and there's the thing is there's loads of other people out there. You just need to find the way to connect to them. You know, there used to be, I think, a lot more groups of disabled people, and there's still lots out there. But some of the community, bizarrely, before social media, there were different ways to connect that some of those campaigning groups aren't as strong as they used to be. So I think it's finding other disabled people to talk to is a big help. Or tweet me. I'm always happy to join in a fight on social media about disability discrimination.
Good. I think for me it's about what advice would you give to allies?
Again, it's listen. You know, it's don't make assumptions about what someone's experience is, and you know, I've learnt this from other friends who are in different protected characteristics, and understanding what help you can be and when. So a friend of mine that I was with experienced, I know lots and lots of the discrimination that he faces, but we were together and I saw it, and it was like, wow, okay, what do you want me to go and have a fight with that? But you know what? And so we had a really sensible discussion. Go, when it happens again, because it will happen again. Okay, you choose not to. Can I say something? Can I shut up? Can I just have a chat with you afterwards? Can I just buy you a beer? What do I need to do to help you? And not take, and so some of those things, I think, you don't always have time to have those discussions, but I think when you see discrimination, I think in the right, other people have to call out. So some of the best things when I've been experiencing discrimination as a woman, and somebody in a meeting stroked my hand and told me they would explain afterwards how this thing would work. Like, what? And actually, it was a male colleague, because I was just like, what do I do? What do I do? Do I pull my hand away? Do I? And it was a male colleague who just called it out. And it was like, yeah. And then afterwards, we had a chat. And he said, "Did it?" And I'm like, yeah, actually, you did that, because I was just in a panic. So yeah, you find people around you who are allies, who support, who can help in that moment. Because it comes back to, I only ever think of the witty and amusing things. It was about 4 days later that I thought, oh, what I should have done was then put my hand on top of his and start stroking his hand. And then he started to, and then I don't know, you know. And so, yeah, everyone needs to call it out when they see it.
It's always, yes, it is always frustrating when a couple of days later, a couple of hours later, when something like that, something happens, and then you think, oh, if only I said that when I did that. Melanie, do you have any further questions?
Sorry, the joys of the space bar suddenly not working to unmute me. It's, I don't know, less of a question, but perhaps something that I know that Tanni, you'll appreciate. It's the fact that the whole transport access thing isn't just about wheelchairs and being able to get them on or off the train. It's also about the fact that conceivably your journey takes 33% or more longer than an able-bodied person's journey takes. And if you are, for example, wanting to travel from north to south in the UK, or wanting, God forbid, to go on a business trip to Europe or on holiday to Europe, there's a whole load of things that we are impacted by, because the transport network, there's one platform at Luton Station, to give you an idea. Platform 5 is the only one where they can get a wheelchair ramp up to a train, because it's the only one that is wide enough. And unless you get the right person on the phone in journey assistance, then you don't actually necessarily get routed to the correct station to do a transfer. And I suppose for me, it's a, can we please let more people know that it's not just about being able to get a wheelchair onto the train, it's about making the rest of it work too, and getting it joined up. And if I had a plea to anyone watching this, it's, can you please, when you see petitions, when you see people on Twitter talking about this or elsewhere, please support us, because it's way more than wheelchair spaces, way more.
Yeah, absolutely right. And a friend of mine, Dr. Amy Kavanagh, has a campaign which is hashtag Ask Don't Grab. And so she's being assaulted with people trying to help. She's visually impaired. Also, and we sort of laugh about this, but it's like she works quite close to the RNIB, and the number of times that people grab her and say, "Oh, I'll take you to the RNIB," and she's like, "We don't all live there, you know." So I mean, it's not funny, but you kind of like, but you know, the number of times someone's tried to push me somewhere I didn't want to go, and so
or moved you in the supermarket because you're in their way.
Yes, yeah. So or I remember when my my daughter was very young, and she was having a hissy fit in a supermarket. So I stuck her in a trolley, and I'm trying to maneuver the trolley around, and I kind of let her take something off the shelf to sort of keep her amused. And someone said to me, "I don't think I agree with you having a child just to help you do your shopping. Did you see her 5 minutes ago screaming on the floor?" You know, so it's like stuff like that. So yeah, there's more, and just actually, if you're interested in train transport, I've got a really cool WhatsApp group that you can join, where we offer mutual support to people who are joining, who from lots of different impairment group backgrounds and different academic, or just different people who care about making train travel better. Because we that it's been massively supportive in terms of the campaigning that I'm doing.
Yeah,
that's excellent. If we could get the information for that WhatsApp group, maybe we could spread the word. Maybe excellent. Thank you very much, Tanni, for joining us today, and to all people who have joined us on our panel. Shirley Congdon, Vice Chancellor, Udi Archibong, Head of Equality and Diversity, Melanie Denyer, student, Zane. Thank you all for joining us, and to all the people who have put comments, and thank you very much, and tune in on YouTube. Sorry we weren't able to review all the comments, but this is obviously it's a very important discussion, and so people have lots of variable opinions on it. So this is kind of this is the end of our Meet the Paralympian event. We're bringing it to a close. So it's been excellent couple of weeks, and to everybody who helped out, and the brains behind getting all these amazing people in is Adam. Adam, if you'd like to say a couple of closing words.
Hello, yes, thanks everybody for coming, but the biggest thanks of all go to you guys, the SABs, for making it happen and for being great interviewers. And also thank you, Tanni, for just answering my text, my random Friday night text, asking if you'll speak. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure, thank you very much. Thank you.
And most of the chats are available on the UBU YouTube channel, so you can head over there to catch up. So yeah, everyone have a great Christmas, and see you later.
Thank you, Tanni.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Bye.